Okay, so let's get started. Hello to our entire audience and welcome to our conversation today titled Building Customer Credibility and Confidence in AI-Driven Experiences. My name is Andrew Lee. I'm an assistant professor of operations research here at Carnegie Mellon. And maybe more relevant for today, I'm one of the leaders of ENAiBLE, which is a retail and services collaborative joint with Carnegie Mellon School of Computer Science and Tepper School of Business. By now, most of you know, but just for the benefit of those that are new, ENAiBLE is a forum aimed at the retail and services industries for meeting the needs of their customers through advances in both design and technology. There's a bunch more info at our site, cmu.edu/enable. And finally, big shout out to our sponsors, Progressive and Zendesk, and specifically Progressive today for kind of partnering on this event. Just a few logistics for this event. Number one, this event is on the record and being recorded. And number two, we encourage you to ask questions at all times. In fact, there is a time dedicated to Q&A, and you can ask questions using the Q&A button in Zoom. That should be kind of at the bottom. We are monitoring that. We see all of your questions, and we're going to kind of incorporate that later today. So to get started for today, we have kind of a very exciting topic. It's one that came out of discussions that we had specifically with our sponsor, Progressive, and it's the challenge of kind of building and maintaining credibility and confidence when deploying AI-based tools kind of in customer-facing ways. Right. We put together is I think a panel that covers the expanse of retail and services in this space. So I'm very excited to have with me two panelists today. Matt White, who is Technology and Innovation Manager at Progressive Insurance, and Frank Liddy, Vice President of Growth at Standard AI. Matt and Frank, welcome to our panel slash discussion. And there we as if by perfect production magic. Here we see. So I'm gonna propose the following. We have limited time. I had basically if it were up to me, I would have put Matt and Frank here, and we would have had a 5-hour event on many different. But you know they pushed back, so we're limited to about an hour, and I'm excited to extract as much value as I can here. So I'm going to propose the following. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to kind of in part one of today, let's say over the next 15 minutes, I want to kind of go to both Matt and Frank, who come from, again, very different areas, and kind of talk about the problems that they're facing specifically, right, with respect to this issue of customer confidence and credibility with respect to AI, right? I'm going to talk to each of them separately, and we'll treat that as kind of a longer introduction. And then in the second part, I want to bring everybody back together, the whole panel, and we'll kind of talk about, challenges and opportunities that kind of intersect, and hopefully that kind of is useful to our broader audience. Okay. In completely arbitrary order, let me start with Matt. So Matt, can you say a few words about your role at Progressive Insurance?
Sure. Well, thanks very much for having me on behalf of Progressive, Andrew. So I manage our technology and innovation team within personal lines acquisition experience. Blessed to lead a very diverse team of talented analysts, data scientists, engineers, BI developers, and then some business subject matter experts. So very much a hybrid team. Most of our energy is spent on improving and optimizing our digital quoting experiences for auto insurance, as well as our special lines products. And as we look at those optimization opportunities, we really focus on trying to leverage innovative technologies and techniques and concepts to make consumers' experience when they arrive with us as easy, personal, distinctive, and efficient as we can. Recognizing it is insurance, and people may not be quite as excited to buy it as we are to sell it, but we do our very best.
So maybe like as a sanity check, for forgetting AI for a second, just like how do you think what is in the minds of your customer? My goal is to kind of land on like a concrete problem. In the minds of your customers, kind of what are your customers thinking about when they visit your site?
Well, if we knew that, our jobs would probably be a lot easier, transparently. The most obvious answer is they're trying to get a quote and perhaps purchase a policy, but I think consumers' mindsets and needs can vary pretty widely. Maybe they don't have insurance and they really need it, and they need it quickly and fast. Maybe they've undergone some life event like a move or a marriage or bought a new car that has them shopping for either better or less expensive options. Or maybe their current carrier raised their rates and they're not happy about it and they're looking to switch. So some subtle, but I think very important differences in terms of their mindsets that we certainly try and keep in mind as we think about potential experience enhancements, so we can give them the tools and experiences across that kind of wide spectrum to help them select the right amount of protection for their needs.
So then along that kind of path, right? I mean, it's clear there's a very well defined. I think if I'm visiting progressive.com, there's a very well defined kind of customer experience. So now getting kind of into the AI of it, what are steps there? What are examples of steps that kind of there's an AI component in that experience?
Well, quite a few, even in that purchase journey, and really just speaking about the purchase journey. And then, of course, our colleagues in CRM and claims and other parts of the company obviously have lots of integrations themselves. I think, Andrew, two that come to mind from my immediate area are the use of predictive models just to help personalize the experience. So really trying to get the right content to the right person at the right time in that journey. One of those includes what coverages to suggest to a consumer. So, as they go through an interview and our friends in product control their rates, but we have some choices about, well, what coverages should we present to them that obviously inform that rate. I think that's one good example. Another is our use of natural language processing models and chatbot experiences to provide virtual assistant kinds of experiences and capabilities, both within our direct quoting experiences and across a few other of Progressive's digital properties, both in acquisition and servicing.
So let me say that I'm gonna repeat that again. I think this is I want to land on kind of the key points for our audience. So let me just say that again, because we're going to need kind of concrete examples moving forward in the discussion. There were kind of two, I think, great examples of where AI has kind of very non-trivially effect on customer experience. One is in recommending particular coverages, and the other is kind of everything surrounding natural language processing, but specifically in kind of the chat boxes that might appear there. That sounds okay?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Perfect. So maybe let me finish this kind of shallow introduction with the. Let's pick one of those, right? Let's take coverage recommendation. To the extent that you can say, what are you guys doing right now?
Well, I'll need to be a little guarded if you in the audience will allow me.
Sure.
We don't want to get too much into some of our secret sauce, but as you might imagine, one advantage we clearly have is just our scale and volume, as we've built a sizable brand over the years. And that gives us, with that scale, a lot of history and a lot of interactions and a lot of potential features to leverage in any predictive model application, including coverage packaging. And coverage packaging is really our process for framing options for a consumer as to the type of coverage limits and deductible amounts that might best suit their specific circumstance. And as I'm sure many are aware, you have a lot of options with different types of required and discretionary coverages, and those can vary significantly by state. And while that choice is a very powerful thing for consumers and something we always want to acknowledge and encourage, we want them to have the ability to choose what's right for them. It can also be overwhelming to a consumer, especially shopping for a product like insurance that they maybe don't shop for that often. So being able to surface to consumers the kinds of coverages we might recommend based on our insurance expertise, based on what they've told us about their specific risks or assets they need to protect, alongside those coverages that potentially similar drivers or risk profiles have also purchased in our history, can really help empower consumers with data, our data, and we make it transparent to them and then gives them information to help them make the right choice for themselves and their family for a product, as I mentioned, they probably don't purchase that often and could use some assistance along the way.
So I think this raises maybe like a two-part question. One is I like kind of a very quantitative approach to anything. So one is kind of like, how do you think about evaluating how well you're doing at this task, right? The task being coverage recommendation, are there kind of quantitative ways of measuring success or failure? And then by that metric, what has been the value of AI?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Lots of ways to measure. I mean, as you might guess, we're quite diligent with our A/B testing protocols and processes, and those apply equally in our mind to any use of AI-enabled experiences as well. I mean, we really think of AI as simply a means to an end and not an end in and of itself. You know, in other words, just because you have a hammer doesn't make everything a nail. But we've seen success in our AI-enabled experiences, and we regularly test one model against another and often go quite deep to try and understand the correlations between, say, model accuracy and specific business outcomes. Maybe those are expense savings or incremental sales or other measures. That said, we often talk as a team internally that we're not trying to win Kaggle competitions. We're trying to help people purchase insurance. So we take a pretty practical approach where sometimes processing time and speed and integration architectures are as, and in some cases more important than leveraging the fanciest algorithm. As to the value, the second part of your question, Andrew, I'll probably have to be a little circumspect again if you'll allow, but it's certainly safe to say that the value of AI generally has delivered tens of millions of dollars in benefits just within our immediate area, notwithstanding efforts across Progressive and CRM and claims. Of course, I'd close with just thinking I'd be a little reluctant to say, well, that's the value of AI as an entity, because I think the value is really delivered by smart people who understand the business, have clear objectives, and are able to come up with good ideas and then think of ways to leverage new technologies to kind of deliver on those potential ideas. It's not obviously as simple as plugging in a magic AI box to solve business problems. It really does require people, as you might guess.
I think that's I think a theme that we're going to keep coming back to is kind of, yeah, that AI is not some sort of it is not, you know, your 1000th employee that delivers whatever. No, it's something that we have to kind of certainly requires a human element. So yeah, right. I think we're going to come back to that issue. Let me pivot to Frank now at Standard AI before kind of the uniting these forces. Frank, can you say a few words about Standard AI and your role there?
Sure, but before I do that, just a big thanks to you, Chris, the entire Carnegie Mellon community, and equally important, great sponsors like Progressive for bringing this all together. I'm Frank Liddy. I look after growth at Standard AI. If you're not familiar with Standard, we're a computer vision company really focused on enabling physical retailers to turn ordinary places like stores into extraordinary spaces. And we do that using computer vision, which is basically a combination of AI, machine learning, where the cameras observe everything going on in stores. But we apply that by retooling physical stores so they can better compete in a marketplace that's ever more digital, where speed is now just as important as proximity. And we've been at this for 5 years. We've raised about $250 million from some great world-class investors like SoftBank, Charles River Ventures, and others. And we work with great retailers like Circle K, Compass, and many, many others. But every day when we're not having great conversations like this, I'm focused on all things growth.
Thanks, Frank. So I think I want to ask like a subtle question just to establish, again, the goal is for our audience to understand Progressive's problems and Standard AI's problems. In Standard AI's case, just want to, as a sanity check,
Sure.
Right, who should we think of as the customers of Standard AI?
Yeah, look, first and foremost, we're a B2B company. So we serve retailers large and small, folks who operate something as small as a micro store of 1 to 200 square feet, all the way up to thousands of square feet. Stores that have just a couple of customers an hour to stores that have hundreds of customers an hour. Stores that only have 3 to 10 products on a shelf to stores that have thousands of stores on their shelf. But ultimately, we have to be mindful of the experience that we're facilitating on behalf of those retailers, which reaches into an addressable market of millions of consumers spending billions of dollars a day.
So I always like thinking of things as a like challenge and opportunity. Let's start with opportunity. So when you're pitching to a retailer, what's the opportunity of the suite of computer vision products that you're offering? The autonomous checkout.
Sure.
How do you think of those opportunities?
You know, Andrew, when we started this 5 years ago, the big problem set here was people were spending too much time waiting online in a physical store to complete their purchase. And if you kind of look at the broader market, that meant millions of consumers were burning and wasting millions of hours just waiting online. And we thought in a world that was getting increasingly digital, that was incredibly inefficient, and that created this inspiration for us to start the company. Fast forward 5 years, and having worked again with some great retailers and taken a lot of feedback from consumers, autonomous checkout's incredibly important, and it's a big part of the story, but it's not completely the whole story. And so the same application of this technology being applied to deliver a great checkout experience can also be applied within the organization to help do things like drive out operating efficiencies. And we can talk a little bit more about that as we go through this. But the combination of a great experience driving incremental revenue combined with applying it internally to drive efficiencies, i.e. to improve margins, also creates the opportunity for us over time to help retailers deliver better engagement with their customers. And so ultimately, this all comes back to a set of business challenges that affect the value of retail. The three most important drivers being, what kind of experience am I delivering? How efficiently am I doing it? And how effectively am I engaging my customers? And so we play in all three.
So this is extremely useful. So yeah, let me again, when I say things slowly, it's with the hope of just audience in mind. So if I'm Standard AI and I'm offering autonomous checkout or some sort of computer vision product to a retailer, there are in fact at least two kind of different groups that serve to or that possibly will benefit from that, right? Or two lines of benefits, right? One is the one most of us as kind of as consumers at these retailers would think, which is that, well, that's super useful to me, right? If you make my checkout process faster, that's got to eventually benefit the retailer. But what you just pointed out is another totally orthogonal benefit, which is that, again, I'm the retailer, but let's say the data that I'm collecting through this or the processes that I'm observing through all of this, irrespective of how it benefits my consumer, that might itself kind of have benefits towards operational decisions that I'm making upstream.
Sure. Look, pre-COVID, experience basically was the most important driver around this. How do I deliver and take the friction out of checkout? But retail has gone through they've gone through 10 years of change that was roadmapped, and they had to compress it into about 12 or 18 months. And in the process, between rising costs, fragile supply chains, labor challenges, I mean, the convenience store industry alone has tens of thousands of job openings out there that they can't fill. And so making this technology relevant, not just on the top line, but also on the bottom line, has also been a great opportunity and a big discovery for us along the way.
So let me end with, and this will tie into kind of where we're going, but I'm going to be, from where I'm sitting right now, to be clear, I've never run a retail business myself, but actually this sounds like a pretty good deal. What's the pushback that you hear? This sounds like a no-brainer. What are common kind of issues challenges that you hear to this?
So for a lot of retailers, when they look at this technology, the pushback is, oh my God, you're gonna have to rip out my shelves, you're gonna have to rip out my checkout terminals, you're gonna have to put these turnstiles in at the front door. And so that's kind of the pushback. That's completely opposite of our business model. We're not trying to rip and replace anything. We basically retrofit our technology inside existing stores, number one. And so that ability for us to be installed, retrofit on top of an existing store footprint, not close the store, not redefine the customer journey, is a big differentiator for us as we engage the marketplace. And so we basically remove all of that pushback. And in fact, the pushback is really minimal. What I think is more important, Andrew, is the feedback. And the feedback, instead of pushback, has really been customers who use this are more inclined to come in more often, spend more, and they're more open to engagement. And so folks that want to get in and out pretty quickly, historically, you would have looked at that customer as sort of a missed opportunity to build a relationship, when in fact, we're proving it's the exact opposite. Folks that are time-starved are looking for trusted places to go where they can get in and out quickly, efficiently, but they also want that opportunity to get even more value. And that's what we bring by way of feedback.
Thanks, Frank.
Sure.
So to our audience, I want to move to kind of uniting, finding kind of common challenges and solutions in this space. The discussion so far has kind of landed perfectly. When I teach anything involving AI, I say that kind of the main two broad tools that we have right now are natural language processing and computer vision. Matt and Frank have organically, without planning, landed on those two as tools that their companies are using. Let me start with actually a very basic question, and I want to pivot this to customer credibility eventually. But actually, at a higher level, I'm curious about the following. So let me just say again, natural language processing, computer vision, these are the kind of, if we had to hit like greatest hits of AI in the last 5 years, we've landed on those. You guys are using at Progressive, at Standard AI, you're building tools heavily based on those. Maybe the first order question is this. Those are heavy powered AI tools. Those are heavy powered technologies. How do you think about connecting those technologies to ultimately your business, the finance side, right? The driving value, right? How do you connect that technology to that value? I understand that's a very broad question, by the way. I expect maybe broad answers, but let me maybe open it up with that question.
Matt, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. Thanks, Frank.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think it's too far a leap. I mean, as I mentioned, it's really a means to an end, right? So where can natural language processing help us, and start to think about our experiences where, how could that help our consumers and by extension, Progressive's results? And chatbots are a good example of that, right? Where people have lots of questions. And as I mentioned earlier, given our scale and volume, we see a lot of the same questions over time. People have questions about full coverage and other things that the dealer tells them or the bank tells them to make sure they got. And with that historical data, it's not too far-fetched to then think, well, we can probably train an NLP model to adequately understand and discern someone's intent and then get them the help they need, and probably do it much faster and speedier than kind of a legacy chat experience with a live agency where you're put in some queue and you have to wait. And fundamentally, that's what people need. They have some need, right? Some job they're trying to get done. And I think NLP can really help them, particularly on those very common questions, frequently asked questions, and can deliver it in a way, frankly, that's a little more conversational than just kind of a traditional web-based FAQ page, right? Where people are having to kind of scroll through all the information that's there, and can do it conversationally. And I think those kinds of experiences, at least in our journey so far, it also gives you opportunities to delight people, right? Like they'll typically ask, we're quite transparent that it's a virtual assistant, but we also have a very recognizable brand icon with Flo. So they'll ask, and that's kind of the persona of our digital assistant. It's Flo. And if you want to ask her name or ask her for a joke, it'll answer that, right? There's just those kind of small opportunities to kind of delight. But the fundamental purpose, obviously, is, we have this kind of history and rich history of lots of frequently asked questions. It's not a leap at all, given the technology today, to be able to automate that. I think the tougher choices typically are around, just because we can doesn't mean we should, right? So there are certain things that we could probably automate an answer to, but it's probably best handing that off to a live actual licensed agent so the person can get the adequate guidance they need.
Look, in our world, very similar to Matt's, disruptive technology doesn't have to be disruptive. It can be constructive. And so we all, enjoy the headlines of disruption. That's important. But when you're trying to be relevant to an industry like retail that's operating on single-digit net income margins, you better be laser focused on value creation. This cannot be technology chasing a business case. This has got to be technology disruptive, yes, but constructive in terms of economic benefit. And so when we sit down with retailers and get to understand exactly what their goals, problems, and needs are, and after hundreds and hundreds of hours of conversations in the marketplace, we basically look at our technology as creating value three ways. One is around applying it towards improving customer experience. As I mentioned earlier, a great experience brings customers in more often, they get to spend more, and what we've seen so far is that this great experience can actually be a differentiator to attract net new customers coming in, particularly in the convenience store industry. Very competitive, but this experience can be a +1 differentiator, all to grow the top line. Critically important, but it can't stop there. So the second major driver is around efficiency. Again, using the same technology to help a retailer understand what's on the shelves. Do they have the right products on the shelves? When they're running out of stock, can you generate an alert if there's a misplaced item? How do you improve the efficiency of employees, particularly in an industry with very high customer attrition, lots of jobs waiting to be filled, and even more scheduled hours of activity? How do you improve that efficiency as well? But I think the third thing of this, just like Matt mentioned, is around how do you deepen engagement? And how do you provide the tools to help retailers, just like insurance companies, I would think about how do you add one more item or create one more conversation? And when you put all this together, not only are you improving the operating margin of the business, Andrew, but through that engagement piece, you're actually making a case to improve the valuation of the enterprise at large. And that's how we think about it.
So I think I'm very curious about the following question. So now, I mean, like you guys you're pushing. Let me ask the following question. So I'm worried about a creepiness factor, which came out in both of the answers that you just described, right? Let me put it this way. So let me start with, in Matt's case, in the chatbot case, right? Our natural language processing abilities are extremely good right now, to the point where, technically speaking, if I'm on your website and I'm chatting with somebody and I ask, hey, are you Flo? Or it's like a very strange question, right? But like, are you a human? We're frankly at the point where you could fake it. I mean, you could basically say no, like you're talking to a human, and that wouldn't be the case. Frank, in kind of in the vision setting, I guess the example would be something like, I think most consumers don't believe that a camera that kind of, for example, watches what they're adding to their shopping cart. I actually don't. I think currently it would be creepy to say that no, we can see all of that. We kind of know your exact behavior inside of a retail store. This is a very long-winded way of saying that I think AI is a step above right now, kind of where we advertise it, right? And so in getting back to the theme of kind of customer credibility and confidence, this really, I really don't know what the answer is about to be, but do you deal with kind of issues of, in terms of servicing customer credibility and confidence, do you ever, in fact, throttle back the technology, right? Do you ever throttle back the technology of what AI is capable of in service of confidence and credibility?
Andrew, I would think about it less as throttling back and more about applying some very strong first principles to how you're applying it. So in our world, and I think what you're touching on here really speaks to things like data privacy. And so in our world, computer vision, we're not doing facial recognition. We don't create or use any personally identifiable information. What our cameras capture are basically converted to, the images we capture are converted basically to stick figures, if you want to use an analog. And so in those stick figures, then we can observe the products they're interacting with, what they like, what they want to put back on the shelf, and more importantly, what they want to walk out with. So it stands in stark contrast to what we've seen in markets like China, where there is definitely a deeper fusion of facial recognition. For us, none of us want to be part of that, and it's a critical differentiator for how we think about and apply our technology in retail. So that does require sometimes an education step, but I think the combination of that education combined with permission-based engagement rules closes that gap. And so the only thing we want to see creep, if you want to use that term, we want to see experiences creep upwards. We want to see profitability grow upwards. We want to see satisfaction creep upwards. And I think during this liminal period that we're in, this threshold that we're crossing, folks are getting very comfortable with this to the point where they're using this as their preferred way of engagement.
Yeah, I would just build on that. I certainly agreed with Frank's perspective on that. I think underlying that is, it really depends on the quality of the actual experience. If it's a value add to the business, to the consumers, then I think we won't bridge into the creepy factor. I think kind of touches on, Andrew, your question of, whether that credibility on the customers, can it be affected by whether interactions are with machines or NLP models or humans? And as I mentioned, I think it really depends on the quality of the experience. When I think about our chatbot and virtual assistant capabilities that leverage a lot of NLP technology behind the scenes, what does people's need? They have a question, they need an answer, and they would prefer it fast. They want to get it quickly. So if a chatbot or a machine can give them what they need, I think they're quite happy because their underlying need has been met. And it's not at all unusual to see people thanking the chatbot for the help, right? And that's an opportunity to delight, like train the bot to say you're welcome as an example. But we're also quite transparent. Like we will not bridge into at Progressive, trying to trick people. Like when you first engage, we're quite transparent that this is a virtual assistant. I think the other thing you have to do is make sure people have off ramps if it's not for them, right? Like don't make it too hard to get to a live agent if they need it. I would sure, as Frank has worked with the success they've had with Circle K and other partners, right? Like there still is a live person in the store, right? If someone needs help, right? But you're trying to make it easy for them to get what they need, improve their experience, and by extension, help the business grow as well.
Yeah. And if I could just come back, as Matt brings up, this is advanced technology, but it's not to bring more complexity into stores, at least in our world. This technology, when applied effectively, actually gets folks from behind the counter who are scanning items and filling bags, and it gets them out from behind the counter and out front, engaging customers where it matters most. And so it's not a trade-off of one versus the other. This is about reducing the complexity in the store so that stores can do what they do best, engage customers and make sure they've got the right products in the right place, the right customers at the right time. And that used to be a very complicated decision process. If we can automate and provide the insights to improve the efficacy of that model, that's where we're going to be.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Frank. Oh, no, go ahead, Andrew. I'm sorry.
No,
I was just going to say.
Matt, Matt, no. You had anything to say? Please.
No, it makes, I think, the words that come to mind, I've heard many use this in the past, but it really is about, as I hear Frank talk, it's about augmenting as much as artificial intelligence, right? Like it's really augmenting a business or experience. And, I think the example in retail is interesting. And, one closing thought on the chatbot example is what it also allows our very talented licensed sales agents to really focus on the more complex scenarios that really require a licensed agent to intervene, as opposed to the very common questions, right, that come up that a chatbot can handle.
So guys, can I ask a related question, right? I mean, like any AI you develop, and in both of your cases, we're talking state-of-the-art AI. I mean, the data that feeds into that AI is kind of the bottleneck, right? Let's talk data. I mean, if I'm thinking again, I have to zoom out for a second and talk about, or if I think about customer credibility and confidence, if I put myself in the shoes of that customer, I have to imagine one issue is just kind of the data that you're asking for. So to what extent are you thinking about the data that you're asking for, the data that you're collecting, the data that you're telling your consumer that you're collecting? To what extent is data privacy, right, an issue for your customers, and to what extent does that dictate, the development of these AI tools? Okay, very broad question. Feel free to take how you want.
I can take a stab, Frank, unless you'd like to go first.
No, go ahead.
No, okay. Well, I think at Progressive, we're being in the financial services sector and in a heavily regulated industry at that, we certainly have a lot of considerations and a heavy focus on data privacy. And generally speaking, as you might guess, we're only collecting the information that we need and is actuarially justifies, to be frank, to deliver an accurate and bindable rate. And those are generally the exact same features and inputs we might use or have available to try and make an experience level prediction, or to use kind of an AI capability to improve the digital experience. Thankfully, at least from my team's perspectives, Progressive has a very advanced underlying insurance product with lots of pricing segmentation already. So as part of that, we ask a fair amount of questions for that primary purpose, which also gives us quite a lot of data to help better personalize someone's digital experience as we learn about themselves and the assets they seek to protect. I'd close, I think, at I think the concept of responsible AI is incredibly important. And it is one, we hear about regularly from the regulators with whom we work in the various departments of insurance. And Progressive also has a very focused effort in that regard that really is encouraging education and collaboration across the company, really lined up on really three core pillars of that responsible AI that I think speaks to the data privacy question. And that's fairness, transparency, and accountability. And I think all three kind of legs of that stool are really important to make sure that you're staying within appropriate guardrails depending on the use case and industry, obviously.
Yeah, and look, we very much feel the same way when it comes to data privacy, as evidenced by the fact, first principles, no facial recognition, no PII. We're not trying to build a data lake. We're basically enabling retailers to deliver better experiences, better efficiencies, and deepen engagement. And as they apply forward in terms of how they want to engage customers, everyone we work with has shared a first principle around opt-in. So explain to the customers what the benefits are and let customers decide how they want to engage with it. And so that ability to manage that and put the tools out there, but give the customer the choice of using this is really where we're at.
Right, your last point, I mean, like especially like a facial recognition, I have to imagine your customers, the retailers are kind of thinking that might be kind of the first order offering, right? Is kind of is that product, and you're kind of you guys have a hard stop on that, and just.
The initial pushback comes from research in other markets and how the technology has been applied. And so we turn a lot of frowns to smiles very quickly when they say, well, what are you doing with facial? And we're saying nothing, because we don't use it and we'll never use it. That goes a long way towards building confidence in the system. So not just for the retailers, but as the retailers explain this to their customers, saying, we're just delivering an accelerated experience for you for checkout. We're not scanning your face, no biometrics, no personally identifiable information. All of that's basically explained up front. And it's basically that experience where you're sharing, you're being transparent about how the technology works, describing not only what it does, but what it doesn't do. And I think explaining both of those goes a long way towards getting folks minimally curious, but optimally confident that they want to use the system more often.
Thanks, Frank. So I want to, I'm going to start pivoting to Q&A. I'm going to start with like a really awesome question that we got from a Tepper alum. Awesome in the sense that I don't know where this is going to go. So let me just pose the question in my own, I'm going to reword it. So I apologize to the question asker. Here's my rewording of that question. The theme is data sharing. Yeah, the idea is any AI that we build is the quality of that is as good as the data that comes into it, right? Garbage in, garbage out, quality in, quality out. In kind of your respective areas, how do you think about data sharing? I guess in particular with respect to your competitors, is there kind of how do you think about data sharing? And that's, again, very broad. And I purposely left it broad so that you'll interpret it however you want. Vaguely, my notion is that, well, the benefit of data sharing is that you build better tools around that data. The loss of data sharing is, of course, you are competing with some folks when data gets shared, of course, there's something to be lost there. So I'm going to purposely leave it that broad, and we can kind of talk from there.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, we probably would be reluctant and don't do a lot of active data sharing with our direct competitors. Now, there are some insurance kind of consortiums where, Clue is a good example, where accident claims information is kind of consolidated across the industry, and Progressive participates in those as would any major carrier or any carrier in the space. I think a lot of our focus on data sharing, Andrew, I started to go down the path. I think probably the bigger untapped opportunities for us to keep tackling is just sharing within the company itself, right? Being able to share from acquisition or media to CRM and to claims, and those data sets are vast and large and take a lot of business depth to understand, but I think that's where a lot of our data sharing focus has been focused in recent years, and I suspect will remain focused in the years ahead, is how do we make the data we have internally more readily available, more transparent, so that other business areas across the company can leverage it, can easily understand it, or be able to understand, how do we even share model features to where you can abstract away kind of the underlying business expertise you need to know about what this variable means in this state and as it's available, but instead be able to think about how can we leverage model features across different business problems across the company, where you've abstracted away kind of the depth of data understanding and you can just try different features and subsequent kind of models for different use cases.
Andrew, if you mean data sharing in the context of aggregating data and sharing that with third parties, that is completely contrary to our business model and not something we're even remotely interested in. When retailers license our technology, they're getting all the benefits of it. They're also getting the raw data. And so the only sharing that's going on is between us as the capture point for that, and then sharing that. I think the deeper thing out of this, no pun intended, from deep learning, is that, or maybe it was a pun, but I think the deeper point here is the data that's collected. There's a massive exhaust of data these systems create. And I think the bigger challenge for larger enterprises is how do you evaluate that data? How do you capture the insights? So we're not interested in sharing data with third parties. We're actually more interested and really focused on sharing insights from the data that our clients not necessarily will not necessarily find, or may take them longer to find out. So examples of that might be helping a retailer understand patterns around loss prevention. What are the attributes of someone who shoplifts? Are there things you can correlate on factors like dwell time? How long are they in the store? What products are they going after? Do they just try to grab one item, or are they grabbing one item while paying for other items? For most retailers, answers to those questions have been an opinion. And in our world, we make them a fact. So being able to create those insights right up front from the data I think that's the more important thing around collecting and sharing those insights. And by the way, if some of those relate to common problems across an industry, if participating retailers agree to share those insights with others, and that's where, for us, we're very proud to work with organizations like NACS, the National Association of Convenience Stores, who recognize their members compete against each other all, on the street all day, but can collaborate behind the scenes around best practices. That's a prime example of where we can take some insights and share that across the industry without sharing troves and troves of data.
Well, I really like, now I'm being biased. This is my personal taste. You guys basically just hit on two massive research agendas from the academic side, right? Sure. One was kind of, Matt was talking about basically, can we even combine the data we're collecting to begin with, right? An organization is a massive object. It collects data in different forms. It collects insights in different forms, and they're not always kind of united in a very clean way. I view this as one of the open problems that we're dealing with right now. Frank, you were dealing with kind of, can I, maybe I have my own data. I've collected a certain set of insights. Maybe I want to trade that for another company's insights, but without exposing the data, right? Can we kind of deal with the insights without ever exposing that data? I view that as, again, another one of the open problems that even on our, okay, now I don't want to impose my own voice, but I can tell you that the academics are thinking of those exact same problems, which is just to say, I feel like our question asker will be the most disappointed, but we've kind of landed on, yeah, this is a really important open question. And it's one that kind of everybody is thinking about, right? This question of data sharing and what is the value of that. Let me try to, I think we have time for one more broader question. This one is on just, well, this might be probably the one that we possibly should have started with, human versus computer interaction. Interacting with humans versus interacting with computers. We've touched on this already in terms of chatbots. In fact, that was one lens through which we viewed this. But again, in thinking, you guys are both dealing with, frankly, advanced AI, right? State-of-the-art AI in your respective fields. Do you deal with the issue of, from your customer's perspective, whether they are dealing with humans versus computers? Does that factor into kind of the design of your product, right? Is that a problem in any way? Is that an issue that you think about? Again, broad question. Take it how you want.
I'll start quickly, Frank. I think as Frank and I both touched on, I think transparency helps a lot. Right? Like, to explain to people what it is, what it isn't. I think kind of embedded in your question, I think, Andrew, is something about interpretability as well, right? And I think that's something we think a lot about. And I think it really ties, it's very closely related to the specific experience prediction decision. For example, if you're leveraging a predictive algorithm as an example to decide what image to show on a particular landing page or a particular screen, I'm not sure consumers or customers are that interested in, why they're seeing this image or that image. But if you're making specific product or coverage recommendations, in the case of insurance, like the coverage packaging example we talked about earlier, we've actually found that giving them as much context as possible actually helps. We're not going to be able to turn everyone into a data scientist. I certainly am not qualified to be a data scientist. I'm barely qualified to hang around the ones that work for me. Incredibly smart people. But just providing some plain English expectations about why they're seeing a certain recommendation can help a lot, and ultimately leave the choice up to them. So you kind of preserve that consumer freedom, but give them context about why they're seeing what they're seeing and then what it's based on, and be as transparent and plain spoken as you can. And then, ultimately they can still make whatever choice they think best fits their needs. It's kind of the way we've been thinking about at least that kind of interpretability, like how transparent do we need to be without creating more friction than we otherwise would remove. And I think it very much depends on the very specific business use case that you're trying to address.
We think of this notion of automation versus customer connection as really a false choice. First and foremost, it is a false choice, because for what we do in an industry that we serve like retail, if you're spending a minute between buyer and seller where 2/3 of that time is scanning items and putting them into a bag, and the associate's just looking down, what an incredibly missed opportunity to have a conversation. And so in our case, we actually believe this technology improves the connection between retailers and customers, because it not just removes the friction from the checkout experience, it actually frees up time to have a conversation. Andrew, welcome back. Hey, is everything good? Just like your 4th visit with us this week. I'd like a cup of coffee on us, just to say thank you. Or Andrew, I know you like a certain type of potato chips. We've got this new product over here. Would you like to try it? Now, if you're just sitting there spending the bulk of your time processing a transaction to serve a system, like a point of sale system, instead of serving your customer, that's where we see this distinction. By freeing up this time with this technology, we're actually giving back time that can be used to deepen that engagement. And we think over time, that's going to be the differentiator for why customers will want to go to a store versus just trying to order something on their phone. If they know they have a great experience, they don't have to go just order something from their device and wait for someone to deliver it in 30 minutes. They'll actually get in the car and they'll drive the 2 miles, because it's going to be an even better experience. And that's the trade-off. But to see this set up as sort of a automation versus human connection thing, that to me is just a false narrative.
Hey guys, thank you so much. I mean, this is like a super useful discussion. I think we somehow managed to find, you guys come from very different businesses. They don't seem to be different up front, but you guys come from very different businesses. I think we've kind of landed on some pretty big issues, but I think pretty cool solutions to them. I want to respect, we have a hard stop at 2 p.m. So let me just try to wrap up. So we have a kind of ending slide here. So first, for our general audience, please stay tuned for an announcement for our event, our next event, just a couple weeks. That's Wednesday, May 18th at 1 p.m. Join us as we speak with some friends in industry on the topic of recruiting and retaining awesome product managers. We're really looking forward to that conversation. And in the meantime, I encourage you again to review our website. That's cmu.edu/ENAiBLE, where you're going to find information about our mission and activities, as well as a recording of today's event and all of our previous events. As always, we'd love to hear from you about what areas you're focused on and what areas you're concerned about. You can write to us at enable@cmu.edu. And finally, we encourage you to join ENAiBLE as a sponsor, which is the deepest way to participate in our community of technology and design innovators. For more info on that, please reach out to Chris Kissel at enable@cmu.edu. So thanks again to everybody for coming. Thank you to our speakers, Matt, Frank. This is an awesome discussion. And to our organizers, Brian Yeski, Laura Alford, Chris Kissel, and our sponsors again, Progressive and Zendesk. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you again, Andrew. We'd love to have a store on campus sometime soon and turn the research into something actually.
Frank, I think we're on that path.
That's awesome.
We're looking for that.
Perfect.
All right,
guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew.